Welcome back to Velshi and Rule. Today, Americans are left to wonder what President Trump will do about the nation's mass shooting epidemic. His record on gun policy has not been consistent. On Monday, President Trump may have condemned white supremacy in the wake of the shootings in El Paso and Dayton, but he stopped short of making any significant call to action on gun safety reform. Now, earlier yesterday, the president tweeted, in part, Republicans and Democrats must come together and get strong background checks. When he spoke on camera later, he didn't call for new background checks. Instead, he blamed mental illness for the problem.
Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun. We must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process.
Well, for fact's sake, on February 28, 2017, President Trump signed a bill specifically rolling back an Obama-era regulation that made it more difficult for people with mental illness to purchase guns. And earlier this year, he threatened to veto legislation that would, in fact, require universal background checks for most gun purchases.
Now, both shootings this weekend have called into question the amount of resources that the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security have in order to track the threat of domestic terrorism in the United States. During his remarks on Monday, here's what the president said.
We must do a better job of identifying and acting on early warning signs. I am directing the Department of Justice to work in partnership with local, state, and federal agencies, as well as social media companies, to develop tools that can detect mass shooters before they strike.
Words are good, they're important, but they need to be backed up with facts. And for facts' sake, one DHS official told NBC News there is, quote, no discussion of new funding to fulfill the president's mandate. On the Second Amendment, President Trump posted this to Facebook back in February of 2016, saying, quote, I won't let them take away our guns.
But for fact's sake, here he is 2 years later, changing his tune after the Parkland school shooting.
I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. He had a lot of firearms. They saw everything. To go to court would have taken a long time. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
Okay, a week before that, at a listening session with Parkland students, the president suggested arming teachers with guns. Listen.
If you had a teacher who was adept at firearms, they could very well end the attack very quickly.
But for fact's sake, 1 day later, he retreated, tweeting this in part. I never said give teachers guns.
And President Trump's stance even changed on assault weapons before his time in the White House began. In his book, The America We Deserve, then Donald Trump endorsed an assault weapons ban. But in a 2015 interview with AmmoLand, Mr. Trump suggested the AR-15 doesn't qualify as an assault weapon. We should note the AR-15 was used in Newtown, Orlando, and Las Vegas, the deadliest shootings this country has seen.
But there is one area where the president has kept his word. After the Las Vegas shooting, President Trump expressed his support for banning bump stock devices like the ones that were used in that attack and enacted a federal ban in March of 2019. We should just also point out that while the president says both sides must come together on background checks,
one side has.
It's not an issue of both sides.
Yep.
The House has passed this. This week alone, since these shootings, Democrats, specifically those running to be the next president, have said, Mitch McConnell, call Congress back in session. We will show up in D.C. Let's vote on it.
Yep.
It is Republicans.
Yep.
It is Mitch McConnell who is not bringing this to a vote. So when you say both sides must come together, one's already there.
All right, joining us now, senior policy advisor Giffords Courage to Fight Gun Violence and former ATF agent David Chipman. David, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. You say that during your time at the ATF, the NRA and its allies made your job harder. How does the president's inconsistency on gun policy make jobs like yours harder when you had that?
Well, the first thing is framing the issue. I don't know how, as our leader, you can talk about the issue of gun violence and try to do so without talking about guns. It'd be like if we were concerned about lung cancer and try to avoid the topic of cigarettes. And so this is an issue of guns. It's an issue of how people get them. It's an issue of how people use them. And it's an issue of how the lethality of guns has gotten more lethal year after year after year. The guns that I used to carry on ATF's SWAT team are readily available to the public today and being used in these mass shootings. So if we don't focus on the issue of guns, we are going to be focusing on other issues that distract us from the core problem.
Yesterday, the president gave remarks. You said it. He's been inconsistent on his policies, especially when it comes to speeches he's given after such shootings. In your words, you said he's offered empty promises. Let's say he were to change his tune now. What should he do?
Yeah, with this president, I think it's very important to focus on his actions. As you pointed out in your previous setup here, what he says varies over time. You know, what I think we need to do is trust people who've done this for a living. For 25 years, I was an ATF agent. I took an oath to this country to prevent gun violence. The single most important thing we can do is create an environment where every time you buy or transfer a gun, you have to pass a background check. Now, this actually aligns with a concern the president has. Even though mental health is a very small contributor to the problem of gun violence, I don't know how you would prevent people with these issues from buying a gun if they aren't forced to pass a background check. So I think we have to be very particular. The guns used in the shootings over the weekend, these are AR-15 and AK-47 rifles. They are modeled off of weaponry used in war. I carried an AR-15 semi-automatic as a SWAT team member, and now these are even getting worse. The or AR pistols that were used in Dayton is even a bigger problem for local police. And I think it's, you know, not a coincidence that, you know, the weapon used in Dayton was manufactured in Kentucky.
David, thank you for joining us. David Chipman is with Giffords. He's a senior policy advisor. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
A former ATF person is not an anti-gun person.
Correct. Right. And so people, and I think that's the distinction. You can want background checks. You can want stronger, you know, gun laws without ever being anti-gun.
How about just being pro-safety?
Yep. Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.